With all the severe weather we've been having, I think it's time to upgrade my generator. If you've been a long-time viewer, you'll know I've had this generator for a very long time, and I think it's time we got something a little bit more up to date. That means I've got to get this one ready for sale. The problem is that things don't go according to plan, and if I can't fix it, I won't be able to sell it. In today's video, we look at this Generac generator, and the problem is that I've got to get it ready to be sold, but it's not working the way it's supposed to, so I've got to figure out what went wrong with it and hopefully fix it. That way I can get the generator that I really want, which is a large inverter type that hopefully won't wake up the whole neighborhood. Now, I'm going to try and repair this generator, but yours might be a little different, so this might not work on yours. If things aren't working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. The first thing I want to do is look it over and see if there's anything obviously wrong with it, and besides it being very dirty because it's been in storage, I don't see anything wrong with it. Now the reason it's so dirty is because of its size. This had to be stored outside under cover, and unfortunately it worked well, but it was able to get extremely dirty. There's nothing wrong storing it outside, but you'll have to take extra precautions to make sure things don't go south if it's going to be a while before it sees the light of day again. However, if you were paying attention, you've already seen what the problem was. It's just too bad I wasn't. Now before I go any further, I'm going to give this generator a quick cleaning, and that's because I want to keep my hands as clean as possible while I work on it. It's also going to help with the sale of the generator. Now let's be honest, when you buy something, you're not looking to see how clean it is because you know it's not going to affect how it works. The problem is that if it looks like discarded junk, most people will see it as that. So to avoid that initial thought, we're going to make it look as good as we can. Now, would this work for a piece of equipment that didn't even work? And I hate to say it, but it does, although I don't think you're going to get the same amount of money for it. After our initial cleaning, it already looks 10 times better than when we first pulled it out of storage. Now, could you get the same results from not using any soap? And the answer is no, unless you're going to use a pressure washer. However, I would resist the urge to use a pressure washer on a generator because you could damage the electronics. Now, if you decide to do that, I would be very careful and even try to protect certain parts of the generator from the water. Also, if you want to go through the hassle of touching up the paint, well, that's up to you. However, I'm not going to do that, and that's because I'm not portraying this as a new or refurbished unit, just a working one, which means I just want to clean the dirt away and that's it. After getting it clean, I think it's now time to test if it's going to run, and the first thing that I want to do is put some fresh 100% gasoline that's also been stabilized into the tank. I want to start it up and check that it's making power, and then do a load test and finally change the oil. Now, since this generator has not been used for a very long time, after opening the fuel valve, we need to check for any fuel leaks. Now, after we pass that check, we can try to start it, and unfortunately, things don't go according to plan. As you just saw, it didn't even try and start, which is a really bad situation to be in. I wanted to take a look in the tank and see if I put enough fuel in for it to make it up to the filter and pickup, and as you can see, there is enough fuel in there. This can sometimes happen if the generator is not sitting level because of the ground, or if it's missing its foot like this one is. Next, I want to make sure the fuel is able to pass through the filter and out of the fuel valve. After taking out the fuel line and putting a bowl underneath the valve, I'll then open it and watch to see just how much fuel leaves the tank, and as you can see, there seems to be plenty of fuel that's flowing out, so I don't think it's an issue of fuel not getting out of the tank and making it to the CARB. There is a very serious issue though, and that's the color of the fuel. Now, I put fresh gasoline into the tank, but as you can see, it's darker than it should be, which means the fuel that was left in the tank might be bad and might also have clogged the fuel jet inside the CARB. Before I tear into the CARB, I need to make sure the engine will start and run after putting fuel into the CARB's throat. So the engine started and ran on the fuel I put into the CARB, which means we have a working ignition system and enough compression from the engine. That means we just need to check the CARB for any issues and of course drain out any bad gasoline that might have been inside it. Now on reflection, I probably should have just drained the fuel out of the CARB and carefully poured fresh fuel into the tank and tested it that way first, but since I haven't started this engine for a couple of years, I was pretty certain the fuel jet might be clogged, so I wanted to play it safe and check it out. Now the reason I should have checked it first with fresh fuel in the CARB is that getting to this particular CARB is not easy. The main reason is because the governor linkage passes through the front cover to the engine. Now is it really that tough to get the front cover off? And the answer is no, but it is a few more steps than it needs to be. Now in the past I have cut a narrow passage through the cover, which makes taking off the CARB a lot easier. However, since I plan on selling this one, I'm not going to do that. Now to be honest, you really don't need to take off the CARB to service it, but if you want to clean it or replace it, this will show you the steps you have to take to do it. What I should have done was just drop the fuel bowl, that way I can get access to the jet. I guess hindsight really is 20/20 because it would have saved me a lot of time doing it that way. At least I'll be able to clean the CARB while it's off. Now a new aftermarket CARB doesn't cost all that much, however, if you intend on buying an OEM CARB, be prepared to have your credit score checked because it's a lot of money. Now I thought it was just dirt, so I was only using soap and water to clean it, but as you can see, it didn't get all that clean. I'm not sure why there's some grease on it, but at least most of the dirt is gone, so I won't be getting it inside the CARB as I handle it. Now after taking off the bowl nut and removing the bowl, I was quite surprised to see the bowl was full of orange gasoline, which means it's well over 2 years old. It's unfortunate, but it seems like I forgot to run the generator dry the last time I used it. So even though I put fresh gasoline in the tank, it didn't displace the old fuel that was already in the CARB, and more than likely that's the reason why it won't start. Actually, it's a good thing we took the bowl off because there's some heavy sediment at the bottom, which I'm going to quickly clean out and then remove the fuel jet so we can inspect and clean it if need be. Surprisingly, the jet is still clear, and that's because the fuel I use is 100% gasoline with no ethanol. Unfortunately, even 100% gasoline won't be viable after this amount of time has passed, so this whole problem was caused by me not running the fuel out the last time I used it. Now that I know what the issue was that was keeping this engine from starting, which was simply old gasoline in the CARB, I'm going to start to put everything back together on the CARB and then reinstall it back onto the engine. But before I do that, I want to drain the fuel out of the tank, and there's a good reason why. Since I didn't realize how old the fuel was in the tank, it ended up mixing with the good fuel I put into it. That means this fuel is no longer good, so I'm going to use it as a cleaning solution or to be mixed into a larger amount of fuel for my riding mower. As you can see, the color of the gasoline is still very dark, so I definitely ruined the good fuel I put into the tank. There's also the same sediment in here like we saw at the bottom of the bowl. That means I'm going to have to remove and inspect the sediment bowl on the fuel valve because that's what it's supposed to do. But after taking it off, I'm surprised to see that there's only a small amount in here. The only way it could do that is that the sediment is not all that heavy, so it's not falling into the trap. That means I'll just clean the bowl, then reinstall it, and then we can finally install the CARB back onto the engine. So how in the world does this sort of problem happen to the guy that fixes stuff on this platform? Well, the answer is very easy. Life happened. I think I can remember the last time I started this generator years ago. I was wanting to check and make sure it was still working, and then I decided to start a running schedule where I start and run it every month for about 10 minutes to keep fresh fuel through the system, but things just didn't go the way I planned them to. Now the biggest issue was my job, as we started to work a lot more than usual, which didn't leave me a lot of time to do anything extra, and starting my generator fell into that category. Now what I should have done when time started to become scarce was to drain all the fuel out of it and run it one last time, which would leave the fuel system completely dry. At that point I could have left the generator in storage for as long as I wanted to, but unfortunately I left the system wet and now I'm having to fix the issue. Luckily the fix really wasn't that tough, but it's just a little embarrassing that it even happened at all. So we're only a few minutes away from getting this generator back together for another test start, and to be honest, working on these large frame generators is pretty easy when comparing them to these smaller inverter types. Unfortunately, just because it's easy to work on doesn't mean things always work out. This time, however, it's not the machine I'm working on that has the issue, it's my camera and me. I got so excited to get this thing working again that I forgot to record the startup procedure, and I only realized it after I'd already sold it, so I couldn't reshoot it. Now, I have to admit it, but I didn't put that much of a load on the generator. However, I just needed to make sure that it still works, which it seems to be. Now, that little space heater wasn't working very well, and unfortunately, I think it's on its way out, so the next time I do this, I'll have to remember to get the larger space heater and the hair dryer. Now, I'm not sure when this is going to sell, and even when it does, there's no guarantee the next person is going to use it anytime soon, so I'm going to do them a favor and drain all the fuel out of the tank. That way, if they take it home and don't use it for a while, it will more than likely start for them when they do. I'm also going to do them another favor and change the oil. Now, is that going too far? And the answer is not really. I typically use it as a selling point in the ad that the oil was recently changed. That way they know they won't have any sort of maintenance to do on it for quite some time. Another reason why this generator might not be starting is that the filter inside the tank or the one on the fuel line might be clogged. If you took the line off the CARB and opened the valve and nothing came out of the line, then it might be clogged, and the fix would be to replace the filter. So in the end, this generator is now ready to be sold and if need be, put away for a very long time. Now some might argue that it should be stored with stabilized fuel in the tank, but to be honest, it's your generator, store it however you feel like it. Now as for me, after what I just went through, I'm going to make sure my fuel system is empty from now on. So my question is, if you hadn't guessed, is how do you store your generator? Do you leave fuel in it or do you run it dry? There is no right or wrong answer to this one. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.